Hello and welcome to Cinema Enigma. In today's video, I gathered a list of differences where the Rings of Power diverges from J.R.R. Tolkien's books and lore. So if you've ever wondered why Galadriel suddenly more of a warrior than a wise leader, or why Mythril's getting more screen time than a rock concert, stick around. So grab your popcorn and your elven blade. Let's dive into the world of Middle-earth and see what's changed and what's just, well, not quite right. Number 10, the role of Aron and Bron. Okay, in the show, we see that Aron is an elven ranger who is stationed in the Southlands, a region in Middle-earth that is largely neglected by the elves. And in the village, there is this human healer. They become involved in the struggle against the encroaching evil and play a role in the resistance against Sauron's forces. These two fall in love, of course, and fight together when all elves have left the people in Southlands. Although it gives the process of Southlands becoming Mordor more screen time and we get more involved with what's happening in Southlands, but these characters have no basis in Tolkien's book. These characters are made only for the show. I don't know if I exactly like their presence in the show or not, but I guess they are there and I think they are doing what they are made for. And I guess that's it. Number 9, Numenor's early decline. In the series, we see that from the beginning of the show, Numenor is not in a very strong position. Numenor is a kingdom with a lot of conflict and a lot of problems. In the early episodes of the show, we see the presence of faithful and king's men. Faithful are people who are faithful to elves and seek a renewed relationship with them and want to be in contact with people in Middle-earth. While the king's men are the isolationists, people who want to be separate from the Middle-earth and elves. We see the confrontation of these two, and of course, we see the weak and unstable state of Numenor's politics through the tension between the Queen Regent Mythril and Pharazôn. Long story short, the show portrays Numenor as if it's already on its downfall. But in the book, it is quite a different story. In Tolkien's writing, in the most of the Second Age, Numenor is a settled, advanced, powerful kingdom that has a good friendship with elves and the Middle-earth. The isolation that is portrayed in the show is a result of Sauron's influence that happens long after the timeline they are showing. Also, that is when we see the presence of the faithful and king's men. It takes a really long time and a lot of evil involvement to turn the Numenor of the early Second Age to the Numenor that faces its downfall. Numenor's decline is the tragic result of its slow corruption over time, fueled by the ambitions of its rulers and the manipulation of Sauron, who only arrives in the Numenor much later. This could be such an interesting process to watch, but the show ruined it by making the downfall of Numenor the central theme of the kingdom that happens from the first moment that it is shown. Number 8, Duran and Elrond's friendship. In the show, we have the friendship of Elrond and Duran, which is portrayed as a strong bond that doesn't break even after not seeing each other for a long time. The show emphasizes their long-standing friendship, with Elrond visiting Duran in Khazad-dûm after many years of absence. And they have all these moments of Duran being upset and mad about Elrond disappearing on him. And after some time, he comes around, makes up with him, and they go stronger than ever. And of course, you know what I'm going to say, it was all fake. In the book, there was no such thing. Not only there wasn't any Elrond-Durin kind of friendship, but there wasn't any kind of close friendship between elves and dwarves at that time. Elves and dwarves had interactions in the form of trade and craftsmanship, but the close friendship between them wasn't really a thing. What it looks like is that they wanted to do a Legolas-Gimli friendship, but as we all know, you can never outdo the doer. I'm not saying they did a bad job of presenting their friendship. They tried to add more emotional depth to the show, although we know Tolkien's work finds this kind of relations rare and unlikely. And it usually happens when a conflict comes up and they have to be together. Exactly like the friendship of Legolas and Gimli. We see that they are not really friendly with each other at the beginning, but their friendship kind of builds itself up on that. And I think that was the part that made them the duo everyone likes. Number 7, the involvement of Harfoots. We know this as a fact that Harfoots are ancestors of hobbits. In the show, we see Harfoots, specifically Nori, as one of the main characters in the show that has an important role in guiding the stranger. The stranger is one of the Istari or wizards, possibly Gandalf, that have come to Middle-earth, and Harfoots find him and take care of him for a while. But we see that the show creates a new Frodo and Sam for the wizard. They start traveling with him and try to guide him through finding his identity. But in the book, hobbits and their ancestors, like the Harfoots, do not play any known role in the great events of the Second Age. Tolkien wrote that hobbits lived quietly in obscurity for most of Middle-earth's history, only emerging as key figures during the Third Age with the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Which makes a lot more sense. This is the character trait of hobbits. They avoid any danger and hardship. They don't participate in wars and adventures like this. They can't just turn any Harfoot and hobbit they find and make a Bilbo and Frodo out of them. Number 6, the Istari or Gandalf. In the Rings of Power, the character known as the Stranger is introduced as a mysterious figure who falls from the sky in a meteor with unclear origins and powers. As I already said, he is engaged with Harfoot, and I'm not going to talk any further about this. But what is important right now is that the main story in this show is about the forging of the rings, which happens in the Second Age. With keeping that information in your mind, Tolkien's writing established that the Istari, including Gandalf, do not arrive in Middle-earth until the Third Age, sent by the Valar to help guide the Free Peoples in the fight against Sauron. There is no mention in the books of any wizard arriving in Middle-earth during the Second Age, nor any mysterious figure akin to the Stranger. The arrival of the Istari is described as a subtle and deliberate intervention by the Valar, and they arrive in the form of old men already wise and knowledgeable, sent specifically to oppose Sauron's growing power in the Third Age. The concept of a powerful being who cannot even talk, falling from the sky and learning about his own nature through interaction with hobbits or proto-hobbits does not exist in Tolkien's lore. Number 5, Celebrimbor's appearance and character. In the Rings of Power, Celebrimbor is shown as an older, seasoned elven smith with grey hair and a more aristocratic vibe. He is already the Lord of Eregion when we meet him, and he is focused on pushing the limits of elven craftsmanship, which eventually leads him down the path of creating the Rings of Power. The show makes him seem a bit cautious, but still eager to make something great, and he trusts Sauron a little too easily. His physical appearance and role as a more mature, reflective character don't quite line up with what we get from the books. In Tolkien's lore, Celebrimbor is described as a master craftsman, but he's younger and a lot more vibrant. Like most elves, he's pretty much ageless and timeless, coming from the legendary house of Fëanor. His collaboration with Sauron, who disguises himself as LOTR, is more detailed in the books, and it's clear that he's driven by this deep ambition to create something as magnificent as his grandfather's. He doesn't realize until it's too late that Sauron's been pulling the strings the whole time, which leads to his tragic downfall. The show also simplifies his motivations a bit. In the books, Celebrimbor is trying to match or suppress Fëanor's legendary work, aiming to help the elves hold onto their power. In the Rings of Power, he still has that ambition, but his character feels a bit more naive, especially when it comes to trusting Halbrand. The show focuses mostly on his relationship with Elrond and his part in creating the 3 elven rings, while the books give him a much deeper backstory with a tragic ending. It's a big difference that shifts how we see his role in Middle-earth's bigger story. Number 4, Galadriel's character and persona. In the Rings of Power, Galadriel is portrayed as this fierce warrior, charging into battle with a sword in hand and hunting down Sauron with laser-like focus. She's also very much single in the show, no mention of her husband Celeborn. The show leans hard into her warrior persona, making her a commander of elven forces. She's out there on the front lines, taking down orcs and seemingly more interested in revenge than her role as one of the wisest elves in the Middle-earth. It's an action hero vibe, and it's definitely not the Galadriel Tolkien had in mind. In the books, Galadriel is a lot more complex. She's married to Celeborn, who by the way is nowhere to be found in the show, and they've been together since the First Age. Galadriel isn't known for swinging a sword, she's more of a strategist and a leader. Tolkien describes her as having immense wisdom, power, and beauty, but fighting battle with her mind and magic rather than brute strength. You won't catch her out there chopping down orcs in the books. She's more likely to be found guiding others, making alliances, or holding down the fort in LOTR. The show gives us a version of Galadriel that feels more like an action hero, while in the books, she's already married and a well-respected leader, working behind the scenes in the fight against Sauron. It's almost like the Rings of Power wanted to mix a bit of Wonder Woman into the character. Plus, where's Celeborn? Did he just go to buy some milk and the store was out of it? It's definitely a big shift from the books, and I hope you understand what I mean by saying the show took all the femininity out of her and thought it was a really good idea. Number 3. Galadriel and Sauron's interaction. In the Rings of Power, the relationship between Galadriel and Sauron takes a wild turn that Tolkien probably never saw coming. In the show, Galadriel spends a good chunk of her time unknowingly working alongside Sauron, who's disguised as Halbrand. They even team up to forge the Rings of Power. There's this weird moment where Sauron, still playing Halbrand, kind of flirts with her, offering to make her his queen so they can rule together. It's like the show took the Lord of the Rings and gave it a surprise enemies to lovers subplot no one asked for. Definitely not what the book had in mind. In Tolkien's words, Galadriel and Sauron don't have this kind of close interactions. Sauron, in his Anatar disguise, does fool the elves, but he never directly interacts with Galadriel in a personal way. She's too smart to be tricked by him, which is why she stays far away from his schemes. While Sauron is busy manipulating Celebrimbor and the other elven smiths into creating the ring, Galadriel is much more cautious. She's always been a figure who opposed Sauron's influence, and there's no moment in the books where she's buddying up with him or being sweet-talked into ruling Middle-earth at his side. Again, with the show lowering Galadriel's character. So yeah, the show definitely cranks up the drama between Galadriel and Sauron, turning it into this tense, almost personal rivalry. It's like the Rings of Power decided, what if Galadriel and Sauron had more chemistry? Meanwhile, in the books, their relationship is pretty straightforward. She's a powerful force against them, and she knows better than to fall for his tricks. There's no dramatic join me and we can rule the world moment. Instead, Galadriel spends her time resisting Sauron's growing influence, especially once she has one of the 3 elven rings. In other words, Tolkien's version skips all the awkward romantic tension and keeps it simple. She's not buying what Sauron's selling. Number 2. Mythril. In the Rings of Power, Mythril is presented as this super rare, almost magical metal that's crucial to saving the elves. The show even adds a backstory that ties Mythril to some ancient battle between an elf and a Balrog, with the light of the Silmarils being infused into the mountain. According to the show, the elves need Mythril to restore their fading powers and immortality, making it a huge plot point. It's almost like Mythril is Middle-earth's version of a vibranium, with everyone desperately trying to get their hands on it. This whole Mythril saves the elves thing is nowhere in Tolkien's writing though. In the books, Mythril is definitely rare and valuable, but it's just an incredibly strong, light-weighted metal, not some magic cure for the elves' fading immortality. It's found in Moria and the dwarves mine it there, but there's no grand origin story involving an epic elf-Balrog showdown or Silmarill's energy. Tolkien never says anything about Mythril being linked to the elves' survival. It's more of a prized metal used to make amazing things like Frodo's chainmail shirt or the gates of Moria. The dwarves love it because it's valuable and the elves appreciate its beauty. But that's pretty much where the lore ends. So the show takes a lot of creative liberties by turning Mythril into this world-saving material. It's like the Rings of Power wanted to give Mythril a bigger role in the story and turned it into the secret sauce for elven immortality. In Tolkien's world, Mythril is still precious, but it's not tied to the fate of an entire race. It's just really cool metal that's hard to find, like a rare collectible that everyone wants but nobody is willing to fight a Balrog over. Well, except maybe Gandalf. And number 1, Forging of the Rings. In the Rings of Power, the Forging of the Rings happens pretty fast and feels a bit rushed. By the end of season 1, we already see the 3 elven rings being created. And it all happens after Galadriel and Elrond figure out that Halbrand is Sauron. In the show, there's a lot of urgency with Celebrimbor and the elves trying to whip up these rings to save the race. Sauron swoops in, drops some knowledge, and bam, rings forged. It's like an episode of Elf Master Chef, but with way higher stakes. Now, in Tolkien's books, this whole process takes a lot longer and is way more complicated. Sauron, disguised as an LOTR, doesn't just drop by at the last minute. He spends years working with Celebrimbor and the Elven Smith, teaching them how to craft the rings. First, they create the lesser rings, and then Sauron helps them make the 16 rings of power, which go to men and dwarves. Celebrimbor secretly forges the 3 elven rings on his own without Sauron's help, because he's starting to suspect something's up. Sauron only makes the 1 ring after all the others are created, and when he puts it on, that's when the elves realize they've been duped. So the show condenses this entire timeline into like a couple of episodes, whereas in the books, it's this long, drawn-out process where Sauron plays the long con. Tolkien's version has more layers and intrigues, with the elves unknowingly getting caught in the Sauron's web. The Rings of Power kind of makes it look like Sauron walking to Eregion, tosses out a few tips, and suddenly ring bling for everyone. It's a big difference, but I guess the show wanted to speed things up for dramatic effect. Here it was 10 differences between books and the show. One thing that worth saying is that most of these changes are for only one reason, and the reason is the compression of the timeline. This story that you are watching and it feels like months or years is actually thousands of years. The show condenses these thousands of years of events from Tolkien's Second Age into what feels like a few months or maybe a couple of years. Characters like Galadriel, Elendil, and Isildur, who in the books live centuries apart, are all hanging out together like it's no big deal. It's like they took Middle-earth's longest, slowest epic and turned it into a fast-paced soap opera. Blink, and suddenly kingdoms rise, rings are forged, and Sauron goes from Halbrand to Dark Lord mode in what feels like an afternoon. Of course, this caused a lot of changes in the story. So instead of seeing the slow build of Sauron's power and the long history of Numenor, we get a much more fast-tracked version. I guess the showrunners figured, why wait 3,000 years when we can just do it in one season? Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to hit the like button and leave a comment. And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more videos.